People who have had a stalker, how did you realize you were being stalked and what ended up happening? U/disposable70 responded. My wife did, it became a real problem. He was a maintenance man at the school where she taught. She was throwing out a lot of old, damaged books. He asked if could have them for his kids, of course. After that he wanted to always be there, wherever my wife was, he was always sweeping or cleaning near her room. Then one day in the winter, my wife got a flat right after leaving school. It was getting dark and her new best friend is there to fix it. While changing the tire, he started asking sexual questions. He wanted to know if she ever had a black man. Of course she said nothing. It got worse and the school administration was ignoring it. I was now going way out of my way to take her and to pick her up from school. She was scared. Then he said something to her while she was eating in the cafeteria. She lost it. She just started screaming and crying for him to leave her alone. They sent her home for a few days paid leave. Since the school was no help, I went to see 2 school board members I knew, but not well. I told them that I had hired an attorney and would be suing the school district unless my wife felt safe. They moved the custodian to another school, but it took months before my wife felt safe. The custodian got in trouble at the next school and was arrested. We never heard from him again. U/camp_express responded. I've never had the threatening stalker, but when I was much younger I did have one of those soft-core stalkers. It was the custodian in my building at work. We had a glass front door and he would lean against it while I was at the front desk. He would watch me as I walked to my car at the end of the day. He didn't ever really speak to me though. One day I entered the building in a skirt and he was on his hands and knees cleaning the baseboards, which put his head about the same level as my nethers. I passed by him in the hall, giving him as wide a berth as I could, hugging the opposite wall really, when he looks up and says something sure smells good. I bolted to my office suite and said to my boss, I feel like I need a hug and a shower. My boss, my former mentor, my now dear friend, threw his hands up when I told him what the stalker said and said that's it. I've had it. First he tried to handle things professionally and wrote the property manager, who said that I must have been mistaken and he was complimenting my perfume, which I didn't wear because another coworker was allergic and it was a small space. When that didn't work he decided to patiently lie in wait. Then the next time the stalker went to look for me at the front desk, boss sits me elsewhere in the office and confronts him. He never told me what he said or how the conversation went, but the stalker quit shortly thereafter. U/Birdie responded. He offered to bring me home after the club. I thought it was nice. But then he knew where I lived. For the next 3 months he was always there when I left my house. He was suddenly on the campus when he studied somewhere else. A few times a week he would be standing and waiting in front of my door, asking the neighbors for my spare keys, because he was my boyfriend and he lock himself out. Fortunately they didn't believe him. He left letters, roses, cough, and one day a knife. A lot of times when he was waiting in front of my door, I would be sitting in my apartment in silence, hoping that he didn't hear me and would leave soon. He was sometimes there until 3. I of course blocked him from the beginning. Told him many times to leave. He said that he could hear our babies and I would rob us of our future together. I talked to the police. They couldn't do anything because he didn't broke a law. One day he called from a different number. My friend picked up and just screamed at him to leave me alone. And then he did. He wasn't in front of my door anymore, not on campus, not in the supermarket. Just gone. But still today I get panic attacks if I see a man with his body time and brown curly hair in the corner of my eye. U/PM me your Digimon responded. There was this weird dude that used to call my house when I was 16. One day when my sister, 13, she answered the landline and heard a man start asking her questions about who she was, name and age, etc. My sister thought it was one of her friends messing around and didn't think much of it. Later that day my mum got answered the phone to the same dude asking for the girl. He proceeded to call about 50 times a day from 3 different London landlines. He never spoke to my sister after the first time but always asked for her. He was vulgar and threatening when my dad spoke to him. In the end we had to pay to have all 3 of the numbers blocked for 6 months or so. The police didn't care. If I recall, it's because he was calling from hundreds of miles away. Even though I never spoke to him, it was just so unsettling hearing the phone ring so often. I think we unplugged it a lot of the time before getting him blocked. We have no idea who he was or why he harassed us like that. I imagine maybe he just spent all day calling numbers until people answered. U/careless_hellscape responded. I knew because he used to be my friend and would attempt to call, text, or message me non-stop after I stopped being friends with him. He also claimed he had people who would keep an eye on me. I had to get a new phone number, block every fake account he created to get past other blocks, and keep people who knew me in the loop about him. Finally, after threatening to kill me when everything came to a head, aka after I got sick of his weird obsessive behavior followed by homophobic rants when I called him out on it, he managed to call me from another unknown number and threatened to kill himself if I didn't give him a chance. Yes, romantically, despite him claiming to be straight. I blocked him again and I have no idea if he did what he claimed he would do or not. I don't want to know either. U/deleted responded. He added me on MSN Messenger when I was 14, and pretended to be someone I knew. Eventually he started slipping, like forgetting he gave me a fake name, and I got weirded out and stopped talking to him, eventually blocking him. He somehow got my mobile number when I was given one when I was 15, and even yelled at my father for answering one of his many calls and telling him to piss off. He then found me like 10 minutes after I created a MySpace profile a year later. I deleted it immediately because he had a photo and he was way older than me. I made a new one a few months later and he found me on that. He has subsequently found me on every social media LVE ever had, except this one, so L just stopped using it. To my knowledge, LVE never seen him in real life, but he knows shit about me. It's really weird. He has always acted like we've known each other and been close. Sometimes he messages and acts like we used to be together. From his social media that I could see without adding him, he seems to be now married with 2 kids. Yet he still finds me. I last got a message on Insta during lockdown from a fake profile he created. It's been half my life, almost. I always joke to friends that if I get murdered, tell the cops to look for the bald man named Joel. U/Serenity Hope 515 responded. I worked at this grocery store when I was 17 doing overnight stock. They hired this third-party company to come in and clean overnights. This guy from that company would always stare at me or find a reason to come to the aisle I was working on. After a while I got a random FB request from this guy, ignored it. He began sending me multiple messages. He then tried to kiss me at work one night. I reported it to HR and got him fired. After that he would show up every night at the beginning and end of my shift. It got to the point I would come in super early and leave really late or have someone follow me to and from work. Eventually I just quit because it was too much. I did get a restraining order. It didn't do much. He kept making fake profiles trying to reach me. Until this day I do not use social media. Only recently became active on here because I realized there are no pictures names involved. Never really figured out how he got my info to look me up, and that creeps me out even more. That was 9 years ago. U/Mangarayan 2 responded. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years had been stalking me online and gotten my passwords to some accounts. Don't share passwords over multiple accounts, and she ended up impersonating me online for years without my knowledge. She catfished people with my pics on dating sites, created a fake Twitter pretending to be me, an Instagram, and even hijacked my old Reddit account. The people who found out she was using my identity told me about it, then tried to blackmail me with the information, with the pretense that they would convince authorities that it was actually me catfishing people and so on. They also claimed she was asking people for money in my name, but refused to show me proof of that. I had to do a deep cleaning of my online presence and confront the person who had been impersonating me. It took a long time, but I got her to stop and I got the blackmailers off my back. Be careful online kids. U/maybe_little_pinch responded. A former patient. They were a bad addict and was acting out on the unit trying to get medicated. They for some reason targeted me over other staff as why they were flipping out. Well, they made a big mistake by threatening to hurt me if they didn't get benzos, because they just got discharged instead. Well, they then went into the staff parking lot and was waiting for me to get out. The police got called and they got the person to leave. Unfortunately didn't arrest them. Anyway, they kept coming around the hospital for some reason still targeting me. They called and got my last name from the operator, which was lots of fun. They got my address somehow. At this point I had a temporary restraining order against them. They had a warrant out for something else and a cop had pulled them over for some reason. They were less than a mile from my house. They admitted they were coming to find me. Later I was contacted by police informing me of what happened and to tell me they had been arrested. They ended up in jail, not just for stalking threatening, but armed robbery, assault, drug possession. They also killed someone while in jail, so they are probably never getting out. I really don't get why they had such a problem with me. I had interacted very little with them and prior to them going off on me there wasn't anything negative that happened. U/convoluted cupcake responded. It was an ex-boyfriend. He was constantly trying to get in touch with me. I blocked him from texting or emailing so he would drive through my neighborhood or mail things to my house. When telling him to stop didn't work, I could mostly ignore it. We had been broken up for about a year and I hadn't heard from him in maybe a few months. I was out of state, in the US, at a geek convention. I parked my car in a huge lot with hundreds of other cars for the weekend, and when I came back to it, there was a very specific gift that could only be from him, under my windshield wiper. I took him to court and asked for a restraining order, but he told the judge he just happened to see my car and wanted to leave me a gift. The judge said that seemed reasonable and he was probably just trying to be friendly. The judge did not care about the previous 2 years of abuse. Fortunately, I did get a signed agreement that he would leave me alone or I would be granted the request for a TRO. After that I got a new phone and new accounts passwords because I'm pretty sure he had to have access to my messages, banking, or email to be able to know where I was. Realizing I hadn't heard from him because he had just found another way to keep an eye on me, was probably the scariest part. U/deleted responded. I live with my mom. This happened a couple years ago. I was taking a shower one night and my bathroom window has frosted glass. As I was stepping out of the shower curtain, I noticed a figure in the window. Said WTH, threw myself back into the shower and pulled the curtains shut. I slowly crept my arm out of the curtain, reached for the light and turned it off. Reached for my towel hanging on the door and ran out of the bathroom straight into my mom's room where she called security from our development. Months after that incident occurred, he tried something different. So, I kept my stash of weed out in the back porch and every night without fail, at a certain time, would go out back to have a little sesh. Maybe do a dab or a couple rips from my bong. One night I was out back listening to music and felt as if I was being watched. I lowered my music, brightness, and shifted my body away from the blinds. I could hear footsteps. At that time, I was frozen in fear, eyes glued to my phone. I eventually gathered up the courage to go inside at a fast rate. I tried to calm my fears by telling myself it may have been the neighbors in their garden. This occurred for a few days. One night I formed a stupid plan if he were to show up. He did. I texted my mom and told her that he was creeping around out back. When I heard her heading out the front door to the back, I slowly went through the front of the house and around to the opposite side of the house. I had a taser in the sleeve of my hoodie. I heard her yelling at him and next thing I knew he had ran past her and disappeared through the back of some other houses. Went to check on her and found a shoe that must have fallen off while he ran. We called the cops but to no avail. Haven't seen him since. U/stunning hearing 7253 responded. He moved 3 houses down from my mom, who I see at least 3 times a week. We live in a big city with lots of different options. He wouldn't stop telling me how much he was in love with me even though I was very clear that I was happy with my BF at the time, and even when my BF and I broke up I still said there would never be anything between us and I didn't feel the same for him. Naive me was still nice to the guy. We worked together in a small company, but then he told me that I caused his depression and wouldn't stop following me at work events. Apparently I caused his depression by seeing someone new. I blocked him for the final time off everything. He eventually left the company. This was about 4 years ago. Couple of weeks ago he approached me on LinkedIn. I didn't block him on it but I disconnected from him. Seems like he paid for a membership to message me, as you can only message people you're connected with. Anyway, the whole message tone was that he missed me but he spoke as if we were in an actual relationship. We were not. I didn't reply and blocked him. Side note. A month before that message my current BF got a notification that he was looking at my BF's profile. We didn't think anything of it as we are in the same industry. Still gives me the creeps. Haven't heard from him since but still get paranoid if I see a car like his driving around. U/X get Muddix responded. I've had 3. First made probably 50 accounts to message me over 3 years and then moved into the house next door. I walked past his house and he had his door wide open and on his couch naked and having a wank. I instantly puked. He got kicked out and haven't heard from him since. Second also made a bunch of accounts and then he realized I was friends with his roommate and got on his roommate's FB and found out I was at the dog park and showed up there. My best guy friend was a scary biker guy and he and his biker gang showed up and surrounded him. His roommate kicked him out the next day cause he figured out what happened. Third knew I lived next to one of the bars and was a regular. He showed up at the bar saying ID left something with him and asked which house was mine. Bartender called me and then kicked him out. He didn't screw off till I started dating a guy. U/untact fully honest responded. I used to work for an airline. A smaller one that was based out of the West Coast and flew to limited areas. Anyway, I took reservations over the phone. We worked in a huge building down the street from the airport with huge floor-to-ceiling windows. One night while working the graveyard shift, only 4 people worked overnight. A man called. I booked a reservation for a flight that would hold his seat for 24 hours. He would just have to call back to pay for the flight to keep the seat. It was a 24-hour courtesy hold basically. He told me all about being a third-term abortion doctor out of Idaho and just began chatting. Finally ended the call. He began calling every night and would hang up on people until he got me. He would book courtesy reservations and never call back to pay for them. I had to change my name on the recording that greets callers when they call in. He wasn't fooled. I wasn't overly concerned until one night he called and began describing what I was wearing and what car I drove. That was it. I was completely freaked out. I hung up and got my manager. I ended up having to be escorted out to my car every day and switching my schedule until I could transfer to another department. I'm grateful my boss took it seriously to help me out. U/Helen Mariskata responded. Met a guy on a night out. Was just out of a really long-term relationship and was looking for a hookup. We exchanged numbers and I went out with him twice, being perfectly transparent that I was only looking for a hookup, which he claimed to be fine with. On our second meeting he had bought me a gift and was way too into me and was catching feelings, so I kindly told him after that meeting that I didn't want to meet up again. He sent me messages begging to hook up again with, I just ignored. He showed up at the bar we had met when I was there with friends and basically trailed me around all night. Told my friend he had fallen in love with me, and she asked him to leave us alone. At the end of the night, my friend and I were at a taco cart, and I guess he had grown angry of being avoided so he just walked right up to me and clobbered me across the face, knocking me to the ground and ran off into the night. He claimed to have no recollection of doing it. I filed a police report, but they were very unsympathetic. I was an expat in a foreign country. They contacted him, and he texted in a panic that he would be in trouble, but nothing ever came of it because I very soon left the country. The weirdo still contacted me over the next months to say how much he liked me and hoped we could get together again. If I had still been living in that city, I would have felt in very real danger of him showing up randomly and attacking me again. U/Mottos007ME responded. When I was 14 and it was end of school year, me and my friends went to McDonald's. My friends finished theirs food and I didn't because I'm a slow eater, so L stayed there sitting and eating my meal for extra 10 minutes. Then I saw a red car stopping next to me and I saw that the driver took a picture of me, so I wrote down his license plate and car model. When I was walking to a bus stop I saw the car passing by me and the driver was looking at me. When I got home I told my mom about this and she decided that we're gonna go to police station and report this. Investors were asking me a lot of questions about that day, like what happened, what did the driver look like, etc. They then called us in the next day with camera footages showing the car literally stalking me. They then ran the plate and arrested the man that took the picture of me. Turns out he was working in a group of people that were kidnapping kids. Luckily they only managed to kidnap 3 kids that were later found in a stable condition. All of this wasn't in media, so when I tell my friends about this they think I'm lying, but I'm not. U/deleted responded. After I left, he started turning up randomly to places I was at, movies, clubs, shopping centers. Eventually figured out that even though LD blocked him on all social media, he was finding me through my friends' posts and photos. Every time me or my friends saw him, we'd tell him to go away and stop stalking me. He'd only leave when we threatened to call the police. The final straw was when he turned up to my job. I was months into my new job, in a whole new town, as a PA for a lawyer. Our office was in a high security building. You needed to swipe your pass at a few different points just to get to the front door. I had been fielding a lot of strange calls for weeks, just someone breathing down the phone. I had suspicions it was him, so I told my boss about the calls so he was aware. One day I got a call and after some time of heavy breathing he said, "Hello, it's Name, let's hang out today." I told him firmly to leave me alone, otherwise LD call the police. "Why would you do that?" "I like you," he whispered as he stood right in front of me. He had managed to trick one of the other lawyers to let him up by saying he knew me. I instinctively yelled, "What are you doing here?" And my boss heard and guessed what was going on and ran to my aid, pushing the guy out of the office. I was in shock and crying and filed a police report that day. The following day I received another call at my office. It was the guy's mum. She told me that she was so sorry about what had happened and that I wasn't the first girl he had done this to. She said they were getting him help and taking away his phone and car, and she would ensure he would never contact me again. And I never did hear from him again. But I couldn't walk anywhere alone for a fair few months after that. U/OK maybe 6638 responded. I had this guy friend who would always tell me that he liked me during high school, but I was not interested in him. On the end of the year of my freshman year, he cornered me near at the library and confessed his feelings that he loved me. But I still was not interested in him. Within the rest of my years in high school, I kept my distance from him. But he seemed really normal after that, having a girlfriend. Then a few years ago, I just broken up with my ex-boyfriend. We had a mutual friend that told him about the breakup between me and my ex. He would message me in the middle of the night on Messenger, and I would just see and go back to sleep. Every time I checked on the message, he would respond without me messaging him. I had to message him back that said I had trauma with his advances in high school, and I really felt uncomfortable with him messaging in the middle of the night. He was a patient at a clinic I work at. If he really did respect me, he came back after a week without an appointment, but he wasn't able to accommodate me due to my schedule being full. I never heard from him since. Asked him to set an appointment another day. He never contacted me again. Came back a few minutes with a sundae for me. Was on my lunch break. My rad tech told me to throw it as she was creeped out because he was still lingering outside the clinic. Even asked my male co-worker if I was married, but co-worker didn't give any info about me. He stayed for hours, until we had to call security to escort him out of the building. Had to have my brother pick me up to make sure he won't follow me home. It went on for months. He would just pop out and hang outside the clinic. There was an instance where he brought me food, but I would reject it. He even made a reservation at a restaurant at Valentine's Day. Good thing we had a policy at the clinic to not give our personal numbers. He would just text the clinic asking about me. I replied through text, pretending to be the secretary, and told him that he was disturbing the clinic and would be pressing charges against him if this continues. He did stop after that. It made me really paranoid for that duration. I had to be more hyper-aware of my surroundings, and I had to get a pepper spray. What was worse is when I sought help from my male co-workers and managers' bosses. One of my male co-workers was even telling me to milk it and have him deliver us food. My bosses didn't even care. One of my senior female co-workers tried to talk to him, but it didn't work. A friend of mine even constantly joked about it. It really felt like I was on my own. Whenever it would come up, I will be constantly reminded of how awful it felt being stalked. U/Dontuweep responded. Mine was an ex-boyfriend. We dated young. I was 13 and he was 15. Dated for a few years, 3 to 4. Anytime LD make new friends or do anything without him, he got controlling, so we broke up. He started dating a new girl and apparently they'd be at his place, and if he saw my car, model and color, he'd chase it down the street. It wasn't my car since I had a fairly popular one. One time he did find my car, though. He had this poor girl in the car with him and followed me a good 10 miles back to the apartment I was living at with my mom that had a gate and followed me through. Parked his car blocking mine in, and that's when I noticed him. He got out crying and trying to get close to me, so Elle ran inside and locked the doors. My mom was out of town. He left shortly after. Middle of the night I heard something outside my window and called my family friend. I was probably 17 so didn't think to call the cops, who showed up and found this guy outside my window. He quietly approached him and held a gun to his head and questioned him. Apparently he had a backpack with rope, a knife, and some vials of God knows what. Don't ask me why the cops weren't called. Years later he went to jail for mass manufacturing and distribution of narcotics and somehow skipped town and I'm pretty sure fell off the face of the earth. I was the first call he made from jail, but the collect call wouldn't go through. I called his brother and they dealt with it, but I will always fear him showing up randomly. You/heretic housewife responded. An ex. I ended our relationship after he started becoming controlling and abusive. I knew he was stalking me because I'd see him wherever I went. I'd stop at a drive-thru to get something to eat after work and he'd be parked in the parking lot watching the drive-thru line. I'd go to the mall, and he'd be sitting on a bench. I'd go to a movie with a friend, and when we left, he was sitting in the last row. I'd go to a restaurant with my mom and he'd be at a table in the corner. This went on for a couple of years. After I met someone else, he started showing up where I lived. Would drive by my apartment building, idle his car on the street outside my window. He'd follow people into the gate and be seen walking around the complex. Yep. It culminated when he got into my apartment. He seemed pretty nice, but was older than me. After that I moved in with my now husband, because he turns up in my town from 2 states away. Years later I found out that a close friend of mine had been having an affair with him and giving him information he was going to call the cops on movements. Next guy was when I was in my early 20s, and when I'd be there, fairly drunk, and also when I would be alone in my apartment. He texted me the next day and invited me to the bar to sit while he was working. I was bored so I agreed. I get there and he's not really someone LD normally date, but he seemed nice enough so I gave him a shot. We went on a few dates and had sex once. It was horrible so I told him I wasn't really interested anymore. He started showing up to my work and wanting me to drop everything to hang out with him. He told me he told all his work colleagues that he had a new girlfriend and he wanted me to meet them. Also figured out he had a young daughter and wanted me to meet her too. I hasn't known him long at all. Last straw was when he showed up to my house. I didn't answer the door so he started walking around peeking in windows and attempting to open both the front and back doors that thankfully were locked. I told him never to show up at my work or home again. His reply was, "Baby, I love you. Ooh." You/equivalent bill 9337 responded. My ex-boyfriend, we dated for 2 years in high school. He confessed he was into dead bodies, abused me, and cheated a lot, so one day I just ghosted him. I was already in legal trouble over him and I'd just had enough. Later I got into a new relationship with my current SO. One night a bit before my court case I get a text from him and several calls. I block him and show my lawyer. Thought that a lawyer mentioning your calls in court that your crazy-ass grandma attended would be a big enough leave me alone, but evidently not. Fast forward, him selling an old chest binder. Deleted. He finds me somehow and starts harassing me through comments on my listings on the selling app him using. 21 already. Later I'm looking at an old social media of mine and some pics of a friend and realized I told him that I several accounts and called me a messaging and a loser, including mentioning my BF. Hours later got my number somehow a few months unsolicited nudies. I think he's married now. That shit away and that I wasn't interested in crazy as to make sure he wasn't too close to where I live now. 3 to 4 days, but I haven't checked since his last stunt. He continued reaching out. Even after I mentioned the crazy iceberg for him and his family, and blocked him on everything. If you're dating a guy who lies about having an Irish accent, wrote me an email that said he tried every combination of my name. I've already had to call the police once over this, etc. 3 years, and he was messaging me begging me back. The scariest incident occurred when I was having lunch with a friend in my city, about an hour from where he told me he lived years earlier, and I got a text from an unknown number with a picture of the restaurant I was at, that said was in the area and I'm thinking about getting lunch here. Care to join me? Searched the number and it was registered in his mom's name. I have never been so creeped out. Thankfully, I think he's moved on, Though, I did get a message request from an account that was consistent with his other fake accounts on Instagram last summer, and I'm 25 now. You/Oswant responded. This girl accused me of sexually harassing her after I inquired about her crush. Then the next day and several times over the next few months, she sent cops to my dorm room to search for various things like guns and stuff. You know, normal college stuff. Then came the rape accusations. They were actually about my boyfriend being raped. He showed up and denied it, of course. Finally, she tried getting a restraining order because she kept seeing me around 99-acre campus that we both live in. In it she said I kept trying to contact her when I never did. It's been about 2 years now and she spread the story, and I got a death threat at one point in the middle of Zoom. I know it sounds like there must be more to it, like I egged her on or something, but no, she's fucking obsessed with me. Recently, she and her friends take over the small Discord server we have for the school. I'm autistic, so I don't talk much to people, and the Discord server was only like 5 people who would talk, and when she showed up with other people, I admittedly did piss them off for various reasons for which I'd like to apologize. Half the server became her and her friends. She just couldn't let me have it, this small respite. She's obsessed with me and I can't do anything about it. You/conscious yesterday 13 responded. 18-year-old trans guy here. When I first started transitioning, I was 15. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. In my school. Leave your own stories down below. I didn't really care too much about it because I was comfortable with myself like this. Please like and subscribe. It helps me out greatly. Level who had